Once upon a time, everyday stories from spiritual seekers, and I was thinking about some of the some of the stories that Tom and I share about meditation and our experiences and just manifestations that happen, and some of them happen, and I actually am a bit at a loss of even how to explain it to my kids sometimes. The good news is that my son, who's 18 and started ASU this fall, he has started meditating daily. He was struggling a lot with the shelter in place. And for a long time, it was just sitting with him and having these really long conversations and just letting him kind of process where he was at. And so as my practice has evolved this summer, we went from having these long, almost like counseling sessions to where I said, "Hey, have you tried this breath work? Hey, have you tried this app? Have you tried this type of meditation?" And all of a sudden he's in his room doing yoga. He meditates every morning. He does breath work every morning. And so the cool thing is that I can now explain some of these things to him because he's seeing some of these things happen in his own life and in relatively short order. Um, so, so when Tom came up with the topic, or I guess the overall idea, the stories from everyday seekers, I thought, well, we know a lot of seekers. We're all seekers on this call. And I was excited to really hear some of the stories that Tom had described about not focusing on self. And so I guess that's kind of where we'll launch. Is Tom, I don't know if you had a few intro words you wanted to say, or.
Sure. Uh, I'm so glad that the group is back together, at least on this format. The Zoom meditations were challenging for me and maybe for a few others. In the future, with this, we will be doing some short meditations. Perhaps even Cecil might bring in a few people he's met through Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, some other team leaders for interviews, and maybe actually even some of you, just to have a forum where we can talk and get together socially instead of just a meditation and that's it. So we're tribal by nature. We want to get together. It was important. Cecil and I thought that the group keep the momentum going. So thus this was born. So we didn't know exactly what to do. And Cecil said, let's do a webinar. I'm not a born leader and not inclined to do something like this. And Cecil just said, well, why don't we just talk to each other like we always do and share stories? So that's pretty much what we're gonna do. And like he said, it's a pretty loose format. So you'll have to give us your comments and help us along the way. How I came about the topic of not focusing on self, was because I was focusing on self. When my business got shut down in April, and then 12 more days in May, 42 days. At first, I really liked it. It was fun to not have to deal with customers. And I'd come in the store, the door would be locked. I could get some work done, lay around, do this, read this. Then after a while, I started to get a little frustrated. And then my frustration turned into a silent angst. And then I didn't like the government again, that old rebel without a clue spirit from the 60s and 70s. And even though I'm doing my daily meditation practice, I noticed that this anxiety was there and I wasn't happy. And then fear sets in, money. I got a child going to college in September. Actually, in a week and a half, I have to go. An air conditioner went out here at work, and as a renter, you have to pay for the air conditioner, and that was $6,938. So I had to find a way to have peace, and I realized I was really absorbed in my own self-made bondage. And so I remembered the words that Swami Satchidananda always used to say years ago. It was kind of his slogan. It said, serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize. And I never liked the first three, serve, love, and give. I thought, just purify, meditate, realize, be a seeker, get self-realization. So I decided to start to serve. But I didn't just say, I'm going to serve and be loving. It happened one day. There's a guy who doesn't have a car, lives in an apartment complex nearby. He has his UPS packages delivered here at my shop because they get stolen from his apartment. And he had about 6 packages, and he rides the bus. He works at the VA hospital, and he hadn't come in. And my inner voice was telling me, he wants me to drive these to his apartment. I know he does, because he can't take them all on the bus. And, you know, in my mind, it's like, oh my God, one more thing. But that inner voice was telling me, just go bring them to James. Bring these packages to him. So earlier in the day, I was cutting down boxes, cardboard to recycle. And my cutting knife, the razor blade, was broke. And I went to get more on the shelf, and there were none there. So I expressed a negative emotion. Oh, crap. Now I got to go to Ace Hardware, such and such, such and such. But that's an important point that I had a realization about, was when you express, or when anybody expresses a negative emotion, it is no different than expressing a positive emotion or feeling in meditation. It will come to fruition. Only usually our negative emotions bring us the bad things that we express. But mine was about a razor blade. So I pack up the things at 6 o'clock at night, the boxes for James, the UPS packages. I drive up half a mile to his place, knock on his door. I bring them in. He's there. And he said, hey, Tom, I got something for you. I was at Ace Hardware, and I just happened to say, oh, Tom uses these. And he handed me these razor knives, just like that. And I was just completely blown away by that. That he's never given me those. I've never mentioned those. He's never seen me cut up boxes. But he knows, because I bring him boxes, that somehow, and I have boxes all over the place, that I might be cutting up boxes. So I realized when I wasn't focused on myself, and I was willing to do an act for somebody, that the universe brings it back to me. And I suddenly realized I was no longer going to focus on myself, wasn't going to focus on lack, wasn't going to focus on fear, the shutdown, the lockdown, the whole works. I was going to completely just move beyond that. And there's definitely more stories that followed. I'll tell you one of them. I don't know if you remember this, but maybe about a year ago at the meditation group in Scottsdale, I told you I had seen a movie called Yes Man with Jim Carrey, where he says yes to everything. And I remember I said to all of you, I'm going to just say yes this week. I'm going to surrender and say yes. Well, that was the week that I had, week before, I had sold a love seat, a $550 love seat to a customer. But he sent his friends in without the invoice and said, here, we're here to pick up for so-and-so. I said, yes, sure. I loaded the stuff out. Then the guy comes in, the actual guy who bought it, a week and a half later, and says, I'm here to pick up my love seat. I said, your friends came in and got it. He said, no, it's my love seat. Well, he pulled a fast one on me, and I ended up giving him another $550 love seat. But when I did give it to him, I still remember this. I said to him, so you didn't pick up this love seat in the light of truth, just so I know you don't know anything about that. And he looked at me and he said, no. And I knew he wasn't telling the truth, but I let it go. I surrendered to that. It's my mistake. Well, about 3 weeks ago on a Sunday, and we're talking almost a year later, he walks in the front door, actually 2 weeks ago, I think. And he said, hey, I'm moving, and I want to give you that futon back. Oh, he said, you want that futon? I said, well, I don't want to buy it. He goes, no, I want to give it to you. And he was already parked in back, and he came and he unloaded that futon in absolutely perfect condition. I set the futon up. I thanked him, but I still looked at him as though he knew that I knew, and yet his conscience must have worked on him. Yet I still yielded. I still surrendered in the whole process of letting him take it in the first place, even after I knew his friends had gotten it. I set it up, and within 3 days, I had sold 2 more of those, that very same model. So by not going to lack, not focusing on self, and when I say not focusing on self, I'm not talking about not being in the witness state, not going internally, not staying in the I am. I'm just talking about not being self-absorbed in anything that occurs in the phenomenal world on the outside. If you want to be the lawgiver, the true lawgiver, then you have to surrender to everything that arises. If it's a shutdown, you surrender. If it's social distancing, you surrender. If you can't go to concerts, if you can't see your friends, if you can't go to your favorite restaurant, you surrender to what is. And those are two stories that just showed me that I don't need to be fearful. I don't need to be self-absorbed. I don't even really need to be concerned about the content of what occurs in my phenomenal experiential world, but more so about the context of my own view of what's happening. And that view doesn't require any dogma. It doesn't require any opinion. It doesn't require any judgments. And that led me to think of a Zen master. And I don't know where I read it, probably in the book Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. There was a Zen master, and every time something happened, all he ever said was, and so it is. And so it is. So I have surrendered to the phenomenal world, knowing that my little self is not as important as everything else. And if we go around saying that God is omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's everywhere, then it is happening in all things, all people, places, things, times, and events in your life. And I'm not going to be subject. I'm not going to go to victimization. I'm not going to go to lack. I'm not going to go to loss. And it was a breakthrough, and that's one of the two stories I shared with Cecil.
I love it. Well, I love it. And it reminds me of not going with the flow or surrendering to what is. It's such a, for me, it's mental yoga. It's this constant adjustment of thought. And just yesterday morning, actually, I often wake up before my alarm, and I'm debating, do I try to get some more sleep, knowing that I'm not going to fall back asleep because just too much going on at work and things like that. But I still try, and sometimes I'll snooze a little bit, or sometimes I'll do some breath work, or sometimes I'll just meditate. And so I get up, come back to bed, and I hear everything go quiet. The AC, you don't realize how loud your house is till the power goes out. And so this is about 6:30 in the morning. I have a huge day ahead of me with calls and things like this. So immediately in my mind, I start my initial program, which is, oh boy, am I going to be able to shower? Am I going to be able, does that work in the house without, power? I don't know why I was worrying about some of the basic things, but will I have hot water? And of course it's AZ. Of course the water is going to be okay. Will I have Wi-Fi? Will I have all these things? And then I paused and I thought, this is way too early to be stressing out. And so I took this breath, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if SRP was just so advanced at this point? Because I haven't lost power in a long time. I was in an apartment last year, and I haven't been in a monsoon season in this house. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if SRP was they just advanced so much that this is a non-issue? So I'm just going to sit here and breathe and practice releasing that anxiety, releasing that angst. And Tom, you mentioned about at the beginning where that kind of starts sitting, it just starts sitting with us, right? Especially with this shelter in place. So I just keep meditating and keep focusing back to the breath. I've been doing a lot of breath awareness meditation, and my alarm goes off. I look at my phone, and lo and behold, and maybe everyone's already seen this, but SRP texted me within 30 seconds of me losing my power. They texted me 20 minutes later that they were on it. They texted me 10 minutes later of the ETA, and then they restored the power 30 minutes earlier than they said they were going to restore it. And so here instead of sitting there and getting spun up and ruining my entire day, I just went. I was like, it'll all work out. I'll figure it out with my phone. Whatever happens, it'll be fine, right? Best case, I get to take it wouldn't be best case, but a day off isn't the worst thing, but of course that's not going to happen. So I I just love how when we do remember to surrender and we do go with the flow, that things truly do go better than we had expected. I mean, I'm trying to as I've been practicing this, I try to think of times where it doesn't occur, where it doesn't actually go smoother than I anticipated. And I struggle to think of times where I'm quote unquote betrayed, right, by that approach to life. So I was writing a little bit, and just trying to think about what does not focusing on self really mean, and is it minimizing ego? I wrote a few of them. Is it focusing on everything within consciousness? Is it volunteering? And I think there's so much that goes into not focusing on self, that it's just this continuous practice. And as meditators, I find that during this year, during this more stressful time in our lives, our practices are so important, because when things are going okay, we can skip a day, or we might miss a full meditation. And when it's like this, though, it's a must. And I now I realize that it's always a must. There's never really time where we shouldn't be practicing, where we shouldn't be taking care of ourselves to the best of our ability. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect. I was talking, Tom and I were texting before this, and I was like, well, I'd rather lose my COVID-20 than get on camera. But if I start, I know it'll all balance out. And so I found that the breath work and the meditation is so crucial to being able to do the surrender, to be able to go with the flow, to be able to accept what comes and shift yourself enough. And sometimes it takes multiple steps for me to be able to shift my thoughts, shift myself to a place where I'm not emotionally reacting. And a lot of times it's just taking that pause for a full breath cycle, just a full in and out, just tuning into the now, just tuning into the moment, and remembering that this is what is, right? It's not being without power the rest of the day. It's this moment. Where am I at right now? I'm laying in bed. I'm fine. It's not going to heat up for a couple hours. I still got some coolness in the house. But without the practice, it's very difficult to be able to shift. For me, maybe not for everybody, but for me, it definitely is difficult.
That reminded me of a moment a couple weeks ago. Came home from work, and I just thought I would go outside and sit. And it was still kind of hot. The sun was shining, but it wasn't shining on me. And I was thinking about the sun and how the sun is self-effulgent, uses its own fuel, but not for its own light, completely gives light neutrally to absolutely everything on the earth. And as I was sitting out there, I was noticing the lawn chairs and some pieces of wood, and looking at the grass, the roses, my tomatoes, the peppers. Well, the tomatoes are all done, forget that. But anyway, I noticed how the sun gives life to things that have a vital life force. And then when I looked at the wood and the lawn chairs and things, then I saw that the sun decays, destroys the fabrics. They get faded, they get old, they rip. So things that don't have life, the sun takes them back in. And so we should be self-effulgent like the sun, and constantly serve, constantly give to whomever comes in our path without any judgment, any bias. The sun has absolutely no bias where it shines its light, and it doesn't use it for its own self. And Cecil, just what you said about your meditation practice, having that practice to be able to stay conscious during the day and to surrender to all the things that happened. Here's a David Hawkins quote on witnessing. One-pointedness of mind means to focus on the crest of the wave of witnessing and observing, plus being willing to surrender perceived loss or gain. That is the primary skill that's needed. So even with a meditation, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour a day, whatever it is, with the eyes wide open during the day, being willing to surrender into each moment and to never relinquish that. And then I thought even further, like this moment right now, as you're all sitting there, we're sitting here, all the books you've read, all the seminars you've been to, all the workshops, if you take all of us, gosh, we've got so many years and so many teachers between us. In this very moment right now, nothing that we have ever learned or memorized is truly necessary in the ever-present moment. It really isn't. It's only in relationship to others, to people, places, things, and events where you want to be kind, you want to be compassionate, you want to be giving, you want to be helpful. That's when you bring in whatever it is that you need. But mostly in every moment of our lives, all we need is the true presence of surrendering, of any mental preoccupation we might have, of any thought, any internal dialogue, anything. And that's helped me a lot, especially letting go of opinions and dogma and all the conspiracy theories I get sucked into by being on Facebook too much. It's really helped me just to stay in the moment and to realize there's a book by Ramesh Balsekar called Who Cares? And you don't need to go out and buy it. The whole synopsis of the book is Ramesh says, the only person who ever cares is the ego, and it has to be rooted in survival for it to care about its own self. Now, naturally, we all need our own survival, and the body has that innate system to preserve itself. But really, just like that sun, we're here to serve and to give life to life and to not be self-absorbed. So take it, Cecil.
Well, as you were talking about the ego, I was thinking about one of the motivational speakers they brought into one of the sales rallies at Insight where I work. And she had been a runner, and eventually she had ADHD, like severe ADHD. And her parents would just send her out they were in the rural area, and they would just say, go play. And so she just started running, like she would run around the fields. And so over time, she just learned that was a way to balance her brain and her body. She would just run and run and run. So eventually she got to the point where she started doing marathons and had a goal of being at the Boston, I think it was the Boston Marathon. And she was there when there was the bombing. And she talks about how she's also trained as a nurse or paramedic, something like that. So her instinct was to run towards the noise and towards the danger. And she talks about how, while it might not be our initial reaction based on like self-preservation, if we can overcome that initial fear, analyze the situation, which she did, and as a trained professional knew she could help. And so she actually started running towards the people in need. And due to that, I don't know if it was due to that, but she started explaining how human beings are actually wired to help each other. We actually have dopamine releases when we're able to help somebody other than ourselves. In fact, there's studies that have been done over decades of time on people who volunteer and the benefits, not only in the longevity of their life, but also the reduction in overall disease in their body. Just the act of giving on a regular basis actually benefits them physiologically. And so I think it's important to remind ourselves, because, at the beginning of the shelter in place, I think a lot of people, everyone is in different scenarios, but I think common concerns are, financial future. And I remember I was buying so many groceries, like I had 3 or 4 weeks of groceries, and not toilet paper. Sorry, don't write me any hate mail, but I would always have multiple meals way beyond what the kids would ever need. And it was usually when the kids were here. I have them every other week. And then I would be here, of course, when I'm by myself. I'm like, why do I have all this food in the house? But It's because initially we do have, I mean, we have that reaction. Our brains are designed to preserve us. But then, you start, you analyze the situation, you adjust. And so then all of a sudden I realized, okay, I have to make sure that I'm keeping my routines up. So I started asking myself every day, have I consumed something positive? Have I, and I might have talked about this before we even ended the Zooms back in April or May. But I started asking myself, have I walked today? Have I meditated today? Have I consumed something positive today? Just those three things. And some days that's about all I could check off my list. I mean, other than work and, the basics. But that was it. And then I started seeing my children struggle. And I mentioned Christian at the beginning, but even Isabella, right? I mean, it's just we're social beings. And so it was easy for me as a parent. I think it's fortunate that I, still have kids that are right here, that it's obvious when they need help. And so I was able to really start shifting my focus to how they are doing, and really making sure we had routines around and I know these are so basic, but it's easy with, when it's work and busy and everything. It's like, all right, here's some food and go do your thing, right? And they get distracted on their device or whatever, or playing a game with friends. And so I really made sure that we would sit down in the evenings and eat dinner together. And even if I ordered dinner in, we'd still sit down and I put it on plates, and there's this connection. And it's amazing that there's days and weeks that'll go by where we just have a normal meal and there's not a lot going on, and it's just, Isabella's got a phone call still going in her room upstairs, or whatever. But then there's other times where we have really meaningful exchanges, and I learn things about things that are going on in their lives where I'll just make a mental note that I need to talk to them about that. And maybe not directly about it, but maybe I need to give them guidance in some roundabout way to make sure that they're able to navigate that with a friend or with school or whatever it is. And I wouldn't have gotten that information or had that understanding of my children if I wasn't able to shift my focus from myself, right? Because a lot of times, I'll be honest, if I had those three things checked off, I kind of want to distract myself. I kind of want to sit down and watch Netflix, or, veg out on a game. And really we have so much more time in our homes. I could still actually do a little bit of that and still have a tremendous amount of time to focus on other people. And so I've been truly encouraged by Christian and his meditation. I just wanted to share one story that happened last weekend during brunch. My son Joel is 26. He's working at Oscar Health, and he's learning a lot around data science and SQL and things like that. But he's like, man, are all corporations like this? I'm really having trouble. And so we start talking about, well, how do you shake that, right? How do you shake that feeling that there's no purpose? And so we started talking about, well, what do you want to do? Like, what do you enjoy doing outside of work? What do used to stream on Twitch, because he used to stream video games, and he had like 1,000 people that would join and watch him play games, right? And of course now that's becoming a bigger and bigger way of entertaining people or entertaining ourselves. And I said, well, what about that? Or what, and then both his siblings are chiming in. And then somehow it came up that we were talking about just performers, right? And people that accomplished amazing things, even though they might not have started out in that way. The example was Beethoven. And of course I just jump in because I just, sometimes I make things up on the fly, and I was like, Beethoven was deaf since he was born, and look at what he accomplished. And of course I now know that Beethoven wasn't deaf till he was 20. But I wanted to drive the point home to my son, like, you can do whatever you want. Just start doing it. You don't need a lot of people to do it. Find your purpose, or find something to create something, right? Because creation is inherent in ourselves. And my son Christian, he's a musician. And so we finished the conversation, and he talks about, he finishes a story about Beethoven and all of the things he accomplished even when he was deaf. And then a couple hours go by, because I talk to the kids and we wrap up brunch, and I sit down, I open my Kindle. I had just charged it up, it'd been dead. I was like, I really want to read some of these books I have some just books I just downloaded anytime somebody would recommend one. And so I'm scrolling, and there was one I had in mind, and I was scrolling through to see if I could find it. And I went to scroll, it was like the fourth page, and I accidentally opened up a book called The Magnetic Entrepreneur or something like that. And within 5 minutes of reading, and I'll send you guys the screenshot of this, there is the story about Beethoven and how he lost his hearing at the age of 20. And it was the full story. And I'm looking at this going, so I, like, these are the stories where I'm like, what does this mean? And I actually closed my eyes, put my hands on my chest, laid back on the couch, and really tried to tune into what are these messages? What are these synchronicities, and where do they go? And the message was too complex to say in like one sentence or story, but everything is so intertwined. Everything is so connected. And when we're doing this work, and when we're doing meditation and breath and whatever else you do to enhance your practice, we reach a level of perception that I really would have never even been able to describe, and still struggle to describe, with everybody in my life, and with things in my life, and with information in my life. And it's really all frequency. So I don't want to monologue all night, but I just thought it was amazing that here within, so of course I take a picture of that. I put it on Snapchat to my family chat, for the kids. And I go, hey, I stand corrected. Beethoven was not deaf from birth. And my son texts back, I knew that, but I didn't want to interject in your story. So.
Well, you talked about that person at work who came in and spoke and went around serving everybody, and how you actually benefit by giving and serving, and it heals the body and releases all those great chemicals in the body. I was watching a TV show with my wife, and she likes those old English type of things. And there was some ballroom scene, and all the dignitaries and, the lords and the whoever they are, all the fine English people. And there's that hierarchy where you wouldn't dare talk to somebody, you have to know them or whatever. I started to watch the servant, who was finely dressed, going around with the serving tray. And I noticed the servant had the complete freedom to go from this person to that person, to go up to the queen or the duchess or whoever it was. And it dawned on me that taking the role of serving allows us to have contact with absolutely everybody, because everybody loves to be served. And when we get underneath people and we serve them with hands that are open like this, instead of hands that are taking, and speaking for myself, letting go, I realized to keep serving and to keep loving. So this woman had come in and ordered a mattress for her daughter, who was just getting out of the crib, about a year old, and she wanted a natural twin size futon mattress. And she didn't want to pay the price for an organic one, but she said, can you make one with no fire retardant? And I can do that. So I was in the back making it, and I was thinking about serving and stuff, and just in a good mood. And I had 2 extra bats of organic cotton, and she didn't pay for it. She didn't want it. Well, she wanted it, but she didn't want to pay for it. And organic cotton is 4 times the price of regular cotton. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to wrap this mattress in organic cotton so her child can just sleep on this beautiful mattress. And so I layered it, and top and bottom with organic cotton. And when she came in to pick it up, I said, oh, by the way, here's some organic cotton. I showed her the sample. I said, I put this on top and bottom for you, no charge. She goes, you're a wonderful person. I said, oh, thanks. And she said, I want to give you a tip. And so the first thing that flashed in my mind is, $5, $20 bill. She pulls out her credit card and she said, put 100 on. I said, $100? She said, yeah, you're doing a great service to humanity. And she tipped me $100. And just another example of serving people. And while I make mattresses, I'm always listening to self-help stuff and YouTube. And I was listening to Alan Watts. And if you've ever listened to Alan Watts on YouTube, he's pretty realistic and I don't have the right word. He's not harsh, but he's right to the point in cutting. And he said, once you realize that we live in a universe, in a world, the earth, where everything eats everything else for its survival. So let's change the word eats to energy. Everything gets energy from everything else. And at first, the time I heard that, which was maybe a year ago or so, I didn't like hearing that because it sounded kind of harsh. But then I realized everything is an exchange. It's an exchange of energy. And that's why we like being in groups. That's why we like being together. That's why we like going to music concerts and things, because that energy is so exchanging. So when Cecil talked about the Beethoven story and how everything is connected to frequency, I was in back making futons, and I've got a shelf there, and it's got junk and nuts and bolts and everything on it. And I noticed something. And so I have these magnets, you can see them, these two magnets, which were given to me by Sharon Warren. Sharon gave me these two little magnets. And I saw one of the magnets had touched a screw, and then another screw had gone and touched that. And then there was another one that had gone on that too. And I realized, though these magnets are magnetized and have the power, which is our body, it also radiates out beyond and resonates to anything else that will be attracted to it. So we really aren't an island at all. Not that you ever thought that, but we're not. We are completely connected to everything by frequency. And, you know, the manifestation stories that many of you have had, and all of us, it doesn't even have to be in proximity. It's, you can actually match that frequency. And giving has proven to me, and serving, that there is no lack by giving. And it was a good lesson. I mean, just when I opened my eyes, I started to see that giving was everywhere, from the sun to people to cars at intersections to yielding. Everything is a moving flow, and it works just perfectly, especially when we're tuned into the universal mind. So then, of course, you know, I love books. And this is a book, I'm sure, I know somebody probably has this book, John Randolph Price. Probably Sharon's got a lot of his books. But I saw a great quote by him. Let me find it here. Let's see it. Here it is. He said, prayer is not trying to convince God to do something for you. It's becoming aware of the presence within you, knowing that God acts for your highest good through this conscious awareness. And so I've been just tuning into that inner voice inside, that just listening to it, even when I think, why should I do that for that person? Or why should I pick that up? Or, oh, got to do this, got to do that. I seem to just be surrendering, once again, like a flag in the wind, being moved by the wind and yielding, and never being without loss. No lack. There you go.
I did want to share one story, only because it just happened, and it kind of blew me away. And then it was explained, but it still blows me away. And so, you know when you're already in bed and you're like tucked in, lights are off, and then you remember something in a different room or downstairs. In my case, downstairs. I wear an eye mask at night to try to make sure it stays dark and I don't have any distractions. And I hand wash it, and I dry it outside and whatever. So there's this whole process. I mean, it's not really a process. It's hand washing. I just don't do a lot of hand washing. So for me, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to hand wash this thing. So it was, I'm in bed, and I remember, oh, my eye mask is downstairs. And I was kind of in a goofy mood. I had done a lot of breath work that day. And they say that the more breath work you do, the more magnetic you become, right? Your field actually expands from doing breath work. And I think there's a lot more that happens from doing a lot of breath work. I mean, not only with the Dr. Joe breath, with other breath that I played with. And I think to myself, hey, would you please, I talk to the spirits in my house all the time. So I go, would you please bring me that mask and just put it here? Like I'm laying in the bed and I just say, put it here. And I just poke the bed next to my head. And and then I feel there, I was like, oh well, okay, whatever. So I go to sleep, and and it was all in fun, right? It was just goofing around, and just I just like to communicate with the energy around. Luckily, I don't do it too much when my kids are here because then they probably think I, is completely gone, lost of mind. But so I had to back up a little bit to finish the story. So when everything started happening, and we were like, okay, we need masks. We don't need masks. Like, okay, what are we gonna do? So I had bought these bandanas because you couldn't get masks anywhere, and they're just the sleeves. And I think you guys have seen the picture of me with, you can pull it up all the way over your head, but normally you can just put it here. I bought some for the kids, and I'd say, hey, make sure you bring these back and forth. Don't forget them. And then, of course, they forget them. And so I think Michelle had talked about that earlier. And so I had bought, we've got plenty of masks now. But I had asked Christian, I'm like, hey, that orange and yellow one, or the yellow and black one, if you see it, just bring it back so we have extras. And this is months ago, probably month and a half, 2 months ago. So I just wrote them off as gone, right? And in the morning, I get up, back to the present story. I wake up and I, poke the bed right next to my head. And I go to make my bed and I just, straighten out my pillow, and all of it, just out of nowhere, I pull out the yellow and black mask from Christian that had been missing for 2 months. It was like under my pillow. And I was so blown away that, of course I have to associate. I have to find out like what happened. And so I actually sent him a text just saying, what did I took a picture. I go, hey, remember this? And he's like, oh, when I came yesterday to pick up my Xbox adapter, I had found it in the bottom of my hamper still, it was all folded, and I couldn't think of anywhere else to put it but underneath your pillow. And I thought, even though I know how this thing got here, I am still blown away by how it all unfolded. It was just a beautiful reminder of, it's so hard to describe, but I think I know everybody here understands that interconnectivity of all of us and all minds. And it's really something that's been on my mind a lot, is that it's all one mind, and really we're just different frequencies of mind and I believe that we could probably tune into any frequency of any mind. And it's not as if I would tune into your mind. I'm tuning into the mind and just adjusting the dial to that frequency. Um, I know it's a bit of a tangent, but I was just, that's how it made me feel when I discovered that mask. And even when I realized how the mask got there, because he didn't tell me he put it there. He just, like, for some reason, he just snuck it there. And it was just a great reminder of how we are connected and how we are here to remind ourselves of that connection, and how those are the experiences that really drive us forward, that really remind us to practice and to do the work and to take the time to ourselves. And in the weekly meditations I do at Insight, one of the things I tell the teammates, we call our employees teammates, is I just remind them, like, please take the time for yourself. And I know this is about not focusing on self, but I truly believe that by taking the time to meditate, sometimes we're not focusing on ourselves, we're focusing on space, or we're focusing on breath, or we're trying to get out of ourselves. And there's so much benefit to everybody around us. And especially when it's stressful, it's very easy to minimize those needs of ours. those positive incremental things we can do every day that just make a huge difference in how we think, in our way, in the ways that we can respond. And so I I guess I could just keep on talking about that, but I'll pause there. And
Yeah, the not focusing on self is not about meditation or staying in the I am or having self-realization. It's about the narcissistic, egoic survival self, focused on one's own person. When it got slow in April, I decided to clean up the back little shelf. It's 4 tiers, and I just stick stuff on there and notes. I found this paper from 12 years ago, old ratty legal thing, and just on the top is written this. And when I read what was here, it was perfect for me during the shutdown. And I don't know where it's from. I didn't write the author's name. When things look the worst, that's the supreme moment to demonstrate to ourselves that there are no obstructions to the operation of truth. When things look the worst is the best time to work, the most satisfying time. The person who can throw themselves with a complete abandon into that limitless sea of receptivity, having cut loose from all apparent moorings, is the one who will always receive the greatest reward. And when I read that, it was kind of like a slap in the face, like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. This is the test. This is the moment. And it made me think of when Dr. Joe tells us to laugh in the face of adversity and to completely do that. One of the best workshops I had was the first advanced Seattle follow-up. I was really, really excited. And I had my new iPhone, and I got off the plane and went to the hotel. And I remember going up to the escalator. I thought, I got to turn on my iPhone. And I turned on my iPhone, and the whole thing went blank. Cecil, we were roommates. That's right. And I couldn't believe it. I was not going to have any contact with the outside world. I wasn't going to be able to check emails, nothing. And it turned out to be one of the best workshops I had. So I'm learning to laugh in the face of adversity and to not be self-absorbed at all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night. Stay healthy. Bless you. Namaste.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.